Welcome aboard, y'all. I am so excited to be here today with the Mr. Adam Sommer. And Adam Sommer is an astrologer. And if you have no idea what astrology is about, now's the time to check in and learn, because plants and planets are completely amazing, as I feel personally, like, as much as that planets have such a huge effect on us as human beings. So I'm so excited here to have Adam as our guest featured healer of the week, and to teach you about what his gifts are and why astrology is flipping awesome. So Adam, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Plants work too. I have a show, or like a subset of my podcast. It's called Plants and Planets.
Yeah, because they really feel like they connect with each other.
Yeah.
Like if you look at like the Datura plant, like it opens up when the moon comes out and it closes when the moon goes to sleep. So they're so connected.
Yeah.
So Adam here has quite a few amazing things going on. I want to say it was 10 years ago, right, that you started the podcast, the first astrology podcast.
Almost.
I
don't know if it was the first one. You mean like in the world?
Well, at least in this area of Colorado, right?
Yeah, there was my friend Gary Caton started one like a few months before me, and then I think there was a couple other ones. Mm-hmm. But I've been committed for over 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah, like almost every week.
Every week. That's a big commitment, and I'm proud of you for sticking to it for so long.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And that's called Exploring Astrology. So if you're into podcasts, you should definitely tap into and listen to Adam's astrology on there, because your topics change every single week, right? Sometimes you have guests, sometimes you do it on yourself.
Yep, there's solo shows, and like I mentioned, there's Plants and Planets. So I have herbalist friends come on and do it like that, and really whatever I'm interested in, I choose to do it. Like we recently did a show on cryptocurrency. Ooh. And that got people really excited. And obviously I duped you with my April Fool's joke, and many other people too. I like April Fool's Day being an astrologer because you get to play on the hearts and minds of the gullible, which my joke was this. It was a good one. It was that me and my friend Greg, who's a very funny man, we basically did the big reveal. So the first like quarter of the podcast is legitimate. Like you think you're listening to a real thing. I mean, he's very intelligent. And so we're just having this conversation about what we've been up to with these partners in Silicon Valley. And what we were up to for the past 7 years is creating an AI astrologer, which isn't out of the realm of possibility. And so this programmer named Turtle, who was also on the show, and we used this voice transformer to create Turtle. He went through all of my podcasts, all of my writing, every book that's ever been written on astrology, all the ephemerises, and then coded it into the AI. And then we revealed the AI, whose name is Sommer, on the podcast of a recording that he gave to this fictional person, a reading. And I mean, it was so convincing that I don't know how many people still believe it. But a lot of people contact me afterwards. They're like, how come you never told me? How come you never told me you were doing this? Like, I'm so happy I know you. You're going to be famous. You created an AI astrologer. I'm like, I know.
I know. So why don't you like follow through with it and like really make it real?
Because I have other things I would like to do. Yeah, simple answer.
Yeah, fascinating. So what got you into astrology?
I think it's just the road of seeking for anything that allows us to understand life and ourselves more. And I never, ever thought I would be into astrology. I mean, I've been into consciousness since I was a teenager. Like, I think I read my first book on Jung when I was 18. Yeah. And so I've always been into this stuff, but astrology was never on my radar. Naropa never even hooked me when I went to Naropa into astrology. So yeah, it just happened in a really kind of roundabout way. And then when it happened, it just took off because I was like, wow, I think I discovered what it was I was looking for. It's like the most ancient form of psychology. And it is so valuable in pretty much any question we have in life. So you want to understand yourself more, astrology can help. You want to understand relationships more, astrology can help. You want to understand your past, your potential future, all of that. It's all possible with astrological techniques. And so, yeah, that's why I started the podcast, because I wanted to talk to wizards all over the world, not just read their books. I wanted to have conversations with them. And then once I started doing that, people wanted readings. People wanted to learn astrology. And so it kind of really organically happened. Like I was never like setting out to be an astrologer. I was just really interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the demand began. I was
Wow.
like, well, I guess this is what I'm doing. Because I was doing something else before. I was doing medical qigong.
Oh, really?
And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I had a practice in Boulder, and it was me and my partner who was doing acupuncture. I was doing medical qigong. So I was content doing that. And yeah, astrology just kind of took over.
So now that you know your chart, is it in your chart that you would be a good astrologer?
Well, I don't know if I'm a good one, but I'm an astrologer.
That's humble. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a few signatures that point towards doing work like this. And one of them that this astrologer actually had a huge impact on me in the beginning, his name's Rick Tarnas. He talks about the planet Uranus in
Mm-hmm.
aspect to a person's sun, like a conjunction, like if it's together or if it's trine, if it's 120 degrees away. That seems to be a signature that creates people that are drawn to doing this kind of work. And I remember reading that in his book, Cosmos and Psyche. I think it's in that book. And then realizing, like, well, I have it. And then pulling up the charts of all these astrologers, and like a huge percentage of them have it. We're talking like 80 to 90%
Wow.
of astrologers that I at least have in my, astrology program have it. So I was like, okay, that's one of them. But then there's other stuff you can look to as well, but Uranus being the main one.
So I'm learning a lot about astrology, and I've always been kind of fascinated with like the signs ever since I was little, or at least like high school, middle school.
Yep.
Definitely I'd say middle school. But
Mhm.
I'm really confused on like what the trine means and like what the degrees mean.
Mm-hmm.
That.
Yeah. So they're just relationships between planets. So it's kind of simple geometry, right? Like if you take one point and then you draw another point 120 degrees away, and then another one 120 degrees away, and then connect them, you have a triangle.
Okay.
So trinal or triangle, right? And so that's considered to be a harmonious aspect. Triangles are balanced, especially an equilateral triangle, right?
Okay.
And so I would say that's more of an intermediate way of understanding the chart. Like you need to understand the planets, you need to understand the signs, you need to understand the houses first, and then you work with aspects, transits, and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, so an example between people, for instance, is there's this wonderful technique in astrology called synastry. So we could put your chart on top of my chart. And so it would be like this double wheel. And then we can see how all of the planets interact.
Yeah.
So if you and I had Mercury, trine Mercury, then we would know that we would have a very wonderful time communicating and we could understand each other.
Okay.
If we had Mercury square Mercury, which creates a square 90 degrees aspect, we might not understand each other. We might have this fictitious thing, right? Like that's where my trolls come from. Probably like their Mercury is square my Mercury, I bet. So you can understand it like that.
Head butting a little bit, or just like not being able to understand what each other are saying.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, to keep it really basic, there's hard aspects, which is considered the square, like I just mentioned, the opposition. Like a full moon is the sun opposite the moon. So they're
Mhm.
furthest from each other, and that's 180 degrees. So those are considered hard aspects. And then there's harmonious ones. The two main ones are a trine, like we just talked about, and a sextile, when two things are 60 degrees away from each other.
Okay.
So in that synastry idea, compatibility basically between people, like it is invaluable, because say you meet someone and you're super excited about them and you come to me and you're like, tell me it's the one, tell me. And then I see Mercury square Mercury, I see Venus square Mercury. I'm like, I don't know how to cut the news to you, but there's going to be a moment, most likely, where you're going to just stare at each other and be like, I don't know how we got here, but like, you don't understand me. We value things so differently in life. Like, this isn't working.
Mm.
Now, I don't do prediction, but I will say that, like, if you had both of those in the chart, in the synastry chart, like, the likelihood of that being a really good match is pretty low.
Wow.
But if those two planets are trying to each other,
Then
there's a
you might have
flow.
good luck. Yeah.
There's a flow. And so it's a very basic way of understanding it, but it works.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, kind of left field here, thinking about, because I really get into like Chinese astrology and Chinese zodiac a little bit too. So
Sure.
it's like, and with your medical qigong background,
Mm-hmm.
do you ever dance with those two together?
Nope. Yeah, Chinese astrology, I know there's something to it, especially in the Taoist sense. Like there's definitely versions of it that are different than like I'm a water pig, for example. And like how much I resonate with that is depending on who's telling me about what a water pig is. But
Mm.
there's a depth to it. And so like I have zero judgment about Chinese astrology, but like all we're presented with is the fact that it's the year of whatever animal and
Mm.
whatever element. And so there's 12, right, in the Chinese zodiac, which it tracks a Jupiter cycle. So Jupiter takes 12 years to move around the sun, and so it moves through a sign every year.
Okay.
And so there's an obvious correlation between that level of Chinese astrology and a Jupiter cycle. But also, it's just as superficial as, say, a person's sun sign, right? Like we
Yeah.
resonate with that, but like there's so much more to astrology. Like when you pull up a chart, like it's not just the sun, there's the moon, all the planets, asteroids, if you want to use them and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never done it because I've never had a proper introduction to
Mm-hmm.
Chinese astrology. And I also am a big fan for simplicity. And so I studied Vedic astrology for a good bit, and I still use some of the techniques in my work. But there was a moment when I just had to decide. It's like, what are you committing to? And it
Wow.
was really for my clients' sake as well, because trying to bring in two different forms of astrology into a session was really confusing, I think, for people.
Yeah, I just actually got a my theta chart read recently, and yeah, like it was so different because like it was saying that my rising, like I was a Gemini, and then my sun was a Libra, and I'm like,
Right.
I'm like, oh no, I was like, I like my chart better, you know.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with either of those signs, but just very different than what my signs are. And I feel like I heard you say on your one podcast recently, I want to say it was your August one, that are you in your Jupiter cycle right now? Your Jupiter return?
My Jupiter return?
Yeah.
Well, actually, I will be in November.
Oh, you will.
Yeah. So you can understand that in developmental terms, like when you're 12, when you're 24, when you're 36, when you're 40, when you're 60. Those are your Jupiter return years. That's true for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's really interesting about that, and you can do this with all the planets, is you can see the development biologically and psychologically that's universal with people
Mm-hmm.
with it. And so, for example, Jupiter relates to the regulation of growth in the body, pituitary gland, endocrine system, all of this. And so at age 12, what happens?
Oh, like hormones, like women start to develop, men start to drop things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge shifts.
So you have like a physical puberty that occurs during the first Jupiter return. And then 24 is really interesting because we now know that the prefrontal cortex comes fully online around that time. So that's like in a way, a mental puberty, like a full sense of self that occurs. And also it's that age as well. I realize it myself, but also in working with people and just seeing it, that it's one of the cockiest ages that we go through. And I think it relates to the Jupiter return. There's another aspect too that occurs universally for us. And it might have to do with, the frontal cortex coming online. And then there's 36, which is an interesting development, especially in women, but there's, I think, a lot going on in men too, where we stop producing as much eggs, sperm, all that kind of stuff. In a way, we reach this peak of our development at 36. And that age, I mean, like the Buddha was enlightened at 35, and it shows up a lot in Vedic astrology. Like they say the planet Saturn, for example, fully matures at 36 within our experience, which means we become hopefully fully integrated body, mind, and spirit. We really know who we are around that age. And so it's just a really fascinating way of understanding time. And you don't even need a chart to do that. And like I said, you can do it with every planet. And so like with Saturn, it's like, of the Saturn return, right? And so
I don't know much about Saturn return.
Okay. Well, it's a good one to know about. I think you're through it, right? Because you're born in what year?
Oh my God. Yeah. It starts at I'm in my Jupiter return right now.
So you're 36.
Yeah. And I was glad. Okay, hold on. I'm going to go back real quick and then we'll jump forward back to Saturn return. But like when you were talking about the developmental of like 12 and then 24, and I was like, oh, so 36 must be kind of when you like really become like married in your body, where it's, you really like start to learn and to articulate and to hone in.
Yep.
On like embody who you are. Like everything starts to connect.
That's the idea.
Yeah,
that's the idea. But like I always think about the Buddha in that sense, because like it was age 35. So it's like right around then. There was this Satori moment.
I can see that. So Saturn return, I think I'm close, is 28 to like what, 30, 31, 32? Yeah.
Yep. Those are roughly the years. And they're very important years because, for example, if Jupiter regulates growth, not just in our body, but psychologically, spiritually as well. I mean, the word that works, that's thrown around a lot when you learn about Jupiter, is expansion. It's how we expand our understanding of everything. And Saturn is, in a way, the opposite. Like the quality of Jupiter is warm and moist. And so it allows growth to happen. The quality of Saturn is cold and dry. And so Saturn constricts. And so that's a really good thing in a lot of ways, because when we are on the road to turning 30, it's in a way a cosmic initiation. It's like, do you really have a good relationship with reality? Are you living in your parents' basement? Are you still putting up your middle finger to work? Are you still so idealistic in all these ways in your life? Are you in a crappy relationship or marriage or job? All these factors that relate to us getting a grip on reality. And so the Saturn return can be a hell of a challenging time for people. And so roughly 27 to 30 is that age chunk. And what you start to realize very quickly, and now that you know this a little bit better, you can start to see it in your own work, that there's a high percentage of people that are reaching out for help during those years. And then it repeats again in the late 50s to when you're 60 years old. And then it repeats again when you're in your late 80s into 90. You know what I mean?
Well, and think of like that huge transition of like going from like what, like 48, 45 to like the 50s. Like, I mean, you're going from like, maiden mother, and then you're entering like the crone, like
For sure.
like that is a huge where it's like, okay, now do you, and I like to think of like when I was in herb school and we talked about menopause, it's like men at pause, where it's like,
Oh, yeah.
Like this Saturn return, I could see how that would also connect in where you're like, hey, let's take a pause back. Let's look, is this really all working? How do you want to spend the last passage of your life?
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so for me, it's one of the most important times. Like working with Saturn is really the work. Like
Oh,
when you talk about Byron Katie, the work, like the work is Saturn. And for all of us, the work is the most important element. And so people that have an odd relationship to this concept or like a hate for Saturn, they don't have a grip on reality. And that to me is the most important thing. I think that I could do my work with only Saturn.
wow. It makes me curious about what my Saturn is, because I'm like obsessed with like the inner work, or like,
Sure.
what are you going to do to get there? Like what blocks are you going to remove? Like,
Well,
yeah.
what year are you born and what's your rising sign? I can tell you.
81, and I'm a Cancer rising.
Cancer rising 81.
Mm-hmm.
So you probably have Saturn in Virgo,
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
right? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's like a generational thing. 2.5 years is how long Saturn spends in a sign, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably have that. And then Saturn would most likely, depending on the house system that you use, it would be in your third house, which relates to ideas, communication. There's this feeling of a lot of times when people have Saturn in the third house, and again, we'd have to look at your chart to make sure this is very true. But there's blocks and like also a deepening. So that cold, restrictive energy is also a lot of times turned inward.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this feeling of, I don't know how to communicate fully what I'm feeling. I don't fully know how to say or write or do what I know to be true. And so it creates this reality of a learning curve to where, all right, then what must be done? Well, you need to learn. You need to address it. You need to do the inner work and you need to have good mentors. And then you begin climbing the mountain and
Mm-hmm.
you become actually masterful at communicating what is actually going on inside of you.
Yeah, I could see that very truly. Like, I even remember the first place I ever lived at when I was 18, and I was living with like 2 to 3 boys, and none of them could understand anything I was like trying to communicate.
Right.
And I remember one of the guys' girlfriend would come over, and she'd be like, okay, everybody, this is what Melissa is trying to communicate. And I feel like I'm so warm and fuzzy, but there is that part of me that it can be that like kind of cold and like restrictive space. But I do feel like it's something that I have continuously worked on, is learning how to use my language to communicate my truth and the desires and what I'm trying to articulate in my mind.
There you go.
Yeah, like that was
Listen,
even hard right there, dude. Jeez. That takes some
mhm.
effort. Wow. Yeah. So great. Yeah, it's great. I'm learning so much today. Oh, okay. So with the Saturn, where I like that how it has like such a different energy. Like you
Right.
don't it's fascinating to me that it's like, I mean, I guess it's just like the same with anything in life, really, just like how we're all connected, how like each planet holds, like you look at like the environment and then you create not the ideal, but like the ideal relationship with the environment.
Sure.
Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay, and I really want to ask you this random question, but like thinking about the pyramids, and like one of the stories is that the pyramids were built with alignment with the planets,
Stars mainly.
stars. Oh.
Yeah. Well, the Great Pyramids, for example, like they're aligned very nicely with Orion's belt,
Okay.
like perfectly. And
Wow.
then the Sphinx, for example, it points due east, and it's the most amazing tracker of time because the Sphinx well, first of all, I think it's much older than we're told it is. I had this amazing man on my podcast about a year ago, and he just passed away. His name's John Anthony West, and he devoted his whole life to studying Egypt and the
Wow.
mysteries of Egypt. And there's like one of the coolest things you'll ever watch on Egypt and the pyramids and everything I'm saying right now is called Magical Egypt.
Okay,
And
wait, I need a pen and paper. Okay, Magical Egypt.
yeah, it's narrated by Charlton Heston, and it's like this 8-part series that he did back in the 90s, and it is so ridiculous. It's amazing. And yeah, anyway, like it's so good that after I watched it, I went online to see what books of his that I wanted to read first. And when you go on Amazon, the first book he ever wrote in 1969 is called A Case for Astrology. So I was like, uh-oh, I'm going to reach out to John Anthony West, also known as Jaw, and see if he wants to come on the show. And he was so open to coming on the show. And
Really?
so, yeah, we had a great conversation. It's actually on my site. So as a time marker, like the Sphinx, for example, it points towards the constellation of Leo, Regulus, the big star that's in the middle of the line.
Okay.
And that's a really interesting thing because it develops some crazy theories that Graham Hancock and John Anthony West and others have about how old the Sphinx is and what it was like during that time. And I think that in their cosmology, especially with the pharaohs as well, like they knew that when they died, and especially if they were in a way mummified with the right items and in the right way, they would just shoot straight back to Sirius or whatever their star was. And because that's home, right? Like there's all of our starry origins to some extent. But when we're talking about pyramids and everything, like a lot of it is speculation, but I mean, my God, you go deep into Graham Hancock's work or John's work and you start to realize, thank God there's people out there that have devoted their lives to trying to not listen to what John calls the quackademics about all of this information, because like it is way more mysterious than is thought. And yeah, there's a ton of astronomy and astrology that's involved with all of it.
It's, yeah, I mean, I feel like I could just totally spin on it for a while, but, you know, it's just fascinating how it's like something so grand and so vast, yet so distant, holds so much impact and like interrelation with like our everyday existence, you know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like how untouched it is too.
You mean astrology in general?
Yeah, and just like the energetics between like the universe, you know, and like the planets and stars and then Earth, you know.
We're remembering. We're in a process,
Process.
of ascending back into this way of understanding what you're saying. I think.
That's fascinating. And you are, okay, so getting back on the track, you are like one of the people that are helping found this platform and this foundation for people. I feel like in a lot of ways, a huge chunk being through the Exploring Astrology podcast of helping people open up their consciousness and their awareness and educating them.
Yeah. I guess that's partly what I'm doing. It's important because like once you realize how powerful astrology is and what it can do, you have your first test, which is the fact that astrology is not accepted universally in a consensus way. And so when you commit to being an astrologer, all of a sudden you lose friends, family members start to doubt you, and it becomes this very interesting stigma that you have to wade through. And I think that's true with anything, but especially astrology. There's something really odd about astrology because of horoscopes in the back of the paper and everything else. And you begin to do that. And for me, I wasn't really affected by that phase of doing it very much. But, you know, I've been doing this professionally for 10 years now. And there's been lots of different lessons and like realizations in my head of like, oh my God, this is how everyone sees me now. This is so fucked up. Like, oh no, right? But still, I really don't care too much. But what you also start to realize is, well, what we just talked about is the pyramids and everything, and how far this goes back, and like where all the mysteries take you with this stuff. And a lot of it's still really intact in Indian or Vedic astrology because it was never damaged by science or the church or anything like that. Like it's still legitimate. It's still practiced by way more people in India than it is here. So I really enjoy that there is a tradition like that that's still alive. And yeah, like getting involved with the mystery and then trying, like I think one of my biggest goals, and even staying public, because I would still do the work, but like doing the podcast, for example, like I'm really putting myself out there and I become bait for haters and everything else, right?
Well, you're vulnerable.
Yeah, you put yourself out there and then you got these faceless trolls that can just get real nasty, and you just have to have good discernment and working with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Like
real.
amusement. I really feel like amusement is a big thing, you know?
Laughing at it.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. But yeah, partly what I'm always trying to do when I write and when I podcast is to make it available for my 18-year-old self. So like when I would read or watch or listen to me, and it'd be like, whoa, like I've never thought about it all like this. Like this is actually really interesting. And so it would make me want to go further. And I'm a very skeptical person. And so if I'm my main audience in that sense, like it's a really good psychological trick for myself, because I'm not trying to impress anybody else. I'm just trying to impress a younger version of myself into getting interested in this. And it seems to work because, I mean, I think it's true with, like, we met at Healing Days, right? It was like 99% women.
Mm-hmm.
And astrology is not different. It's like 80+% women that are really into it and like, you know, reach out for readings with me. And I have no problem with that. But I am also trying to get more men involved, because there's so many men just like me that would really come alive with this information. And so I guess I'm always thinking about that too. It's like, how can I
Connect.
get that, you know, the boyfriend of the girl on the road trip that's wanting to listen to me, and he's like, oh, I've never, Like, I think about these things when I record, because I don't exactly have like a target audience or a marketing plan for myself. I never think like that, but I do have those ideas of like, okay, my younger self, the guy, and also just being hopefully universally compatible for the most part, like not offensive. I don't want to be offensive.
You know, that like makes sense too, because it's like the women are the ones that like want to peel apart things and want to know the depths of things and why is everything this way. But it's like when you look at astrology, like, I mean, it's a lot of geometrics, it's a lot of there's a lot of facts, which could be really, I mean, I could see how a male's mind could wrap their head around it just on a biological anatomical standpoint better than like a woman would in some ways.
And there's a lot of male teachers in astrology, which is this funny thing when the field is dominated by women as far as interest.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, I've never been to a conference, but they have a rule now at these conferences where it has to be 50-50 as far as presenters. I didn't know that, but I guess it's the case with these big astrology conferences, which is a wonderful idea. But I know with my own experience that the astrologers that are out there that I'm really influenced by and attracted to, a lot of them are men.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got into astrology because of a man.
Yeah.
And it's a paradox kind of.
Well, and like on an energetic level too, like one of the things I'm really fascinated about is like the interrelation between the male and female energy within our own bodies. So it's like the epitome of male energy. Like I always use the description of like, pretend you walk into like a Super Bowl game, right? Like at a house, and you walk in and all the men are like sitting there watching the Super Bowl. Like that's the epitome of like male energy.
Sure.
And then you walk into the kitchen where all the women are, and it's like, like that's the epitome of female energy, right? So female energy is very creative. We have we can create and destroy a lot of things. But the male energy they can create, but they're better at kind of destroying things as well, too. They have a little bit more of like, they can break things apart and rebuild it. But the thing about male energy is it has completion. So they're really good at like taking an idea and like implementing it and like to fulfillment. Mm-hmm. Where when women run too high of female energy, it's like we have all these ideas, but we're not actually able to like complete any of them because we need to run a little bit more male energy in our space. So thinking about male astronomers, it's like to get out in the world, it takes a lot of like discipline and a lot of like wanting to complete or conquer or complete a mission, so
sure.
I mean, maybe that's just like one idea thought about it,
Well, it's pretty general, but I know what you're getting at. And to use astrology language, Venus and Mars are very much the anima and the animus, or the inner lady and the inner gentleman, right? Mm-hmm. Like we all have. And primarily Venus's role in our lives is to connect to what we value and what we're attracted to and what we want to love. Mm-hmm. Right. So that it is creative. Like that's the energy that we really need to connect to things that feed us and are valuable. Mm-hmm. And Mars, not to say it's its only role, but like one of the main roles Mars has is to sever. And that is to cut the cord from the voice in your head that came from a troll, to cut the cord in that relationship that is toxic and it no longer needs to be there anymore, to cut anything out of our lives. And so you have the sword, the shield, and the line in the sand. And it takes a lot of courage to be like that, to make those decisions in life. Mm. That's Mars's main role, is to protect her.
Oh, I like that.
Right? He helps to protect what it is that we value, our assets, everything that we love. And I mean, there's creative energy in everything, in all the planetary archetypes, but like if there was a primary purpose of Mars, it's that. And so does that mean the primary purpose of men is to sever and cut these cords? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But like there is, because it relates to the will, Mars does, like the third chakra. And so when Venus is like, I want that, he's like, all right, I'll go get it for you.
Yeah.
And then I'll protect it.
I need that Mars.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that sounds so enticing. I would love that in my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what chakra does the Venus? Is she the heart?
Anahata. Yep.
Anahata. I just even like hearing that name. Anahata. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm sure too, in that same dance, it's like Venus, Anahata, like helps the male come out of the power source and step more into the heart,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. And then you have a retreat that's coming up soon.
That I'm going to be talking about these two a lot at. Yeah.
Oh, Mars and Venus, really?
Well, it's called Cycles Within Cycles.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's so unbelievably cool about astrology is that, well, first of all, you can see these planets that we're studying in a chart. They are in the sky and they have dances that they do. They move. They're not always in the same place, right? Mm-hmm. So it's called synodic cycles. And pretty much the entirety of my career, I've studied the Venus cycle and the Mars one for about half of it. At this point, it is invaluable to the work I do because it allows for the deepest context of understanding where we're at on the journey with both of them. Mm-hmm. Right? And so to keep it very simple, is like, where are you at with love, mm-hmm. self-love, but with another person, you track the Venus cycle in your life and you can really understand that. With Mars, you track that. It's like, well, what are you after? What are you training for? Like, where's the battle? Because we're always in a battle mm-hmm. of some kind. Like there's inner struggles all the time in our lives. That's why we're here. And so like those battles need to be understood, like where they're taking place, how to use our energy wisely, what battles not to fight, all of that can be tracked with the Mars cycle. And so what's going to be amazing about the retreat is both of them are quite visible already at the moment, but there's a huge event with Mars this summer where he goes retrograde, but it's going to be involved with these eclipses, and he's going to be really close. So he's going to be like huge, a little red eye in the sky this summer. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're going to be able to look at the hot springs, because we're doing the retreat at Joyful Journey down in southern Colorado. And then Venus as well is getting brighter and brighter and higher in the evening sky. And so she's going to be around for the retreat too. So like we're going to do the majority of our work with the two of them. And then every night around the fire or in the hot springs or whatever, we're going to be able to actually see them because it's a new moon weekend. So perfect for stargazing. Also the San Luis Valley, no light pollution. So it's ideal for tracking these planets. And so that's why we chose to do it then. And it's unfortunate timing too, because like the biggest astrology conference in the world is happening like a couple days after my retreat. And I just know myself after doing like 5 days of a retreat, going to Chicago for another week of astrology, it's not in the cards for me. I can't do it. So I'm kind of bummed actually.
Yeah. Totally, because especially like going into this like super like earthy, like quiet, serene place, and then going into like a high buzz.
Chicago, a big hotel, I think thousands of people.
Why would they do it there? That seems like such a weird, like you can't even see the stars probably.
I don't know. Venue. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's huge. They do it every 4 years. It's called UAC, United Astrology Conference. And pretty much every astrologer colleague I know, and then some, are going to be there. And so I've decided I can't. This is no way.
It's like too much. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there's another event I'm doing in June here.
Really?
In Boulder, early June. So yeah, I think I'm getting wiser around like what I can say no to.
Yeah. Oh, you're working with that Mars energy. That is so
great. Mars is no. The power of no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question, do you have to go to one of your retreats, do you have to know anything about astrology?
Nope.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Nope. Yeah, there was a few people last time. We did one in November at the same place that just found it through Google, like stumbling on Una's site. And they're like, I want to go on a retreat. This looks cool. And so there was like 3 or 4 people.
Wow.
That showed up like that. It was my first retreat too.
Sweet.
So that was amazing. And like 2 of them had no idea about astrology and they loved it. Because it's a lot of my students that are going to be there too, and so they're learning. And the idea of the experience with the astrology is not me lecturing throughout the whole weekend. I actually hold these astrology circles, and so the idea is like I have a projector. It's a huge conference room. It's beautiful. We sit in a circle. And then I will open up the material, maybe talk 20, 30 minutes about, say, why Mars is important right now. And here's where he's at in the cycle. And here's how we're going to connect with him tonight. And then what happens is I open it up to the circle, not just for questions, but to use their charts as examples. And so going into the retreat, I have all their charts already casted in my computer. And so I can just pull it up really quick and then we all can see it.
Wow.
And then go from there. It's like mini readings, stories, conversation, everyone else, because again, a lot of my students are there, chime in. And it becomes this really interactive, I would say also community building experience, because when I'm not just talking myself at people the whole time, I'm trying to educate them. And instead it's this really wonderful circle. It makes people trust others and open up a little bit more. And that's the whole purpose of a retreat, in my opinion, is to really retreat away, make new connections. And last time was incredible what happened. Like lifetime friendships began at that retreat. So much changed. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was just gonna say. It's like you are like having layers unfold from you,
Sure.
you know, where it's like, and to be in such a supportive place with like, and in some ways it's like, I feel like it's so hard for people to open up and be vulnerable. But if you don't know anyone like that, kind of, it's like, okay, like you let your guard down because you're like, I'll never see these people again, you know, like, and you can kind of let some of those layers down. But then what happens is you end up building really amazing, intimate heart-to-heart connections.
For sure.
That's incredible. So, okay, so that's called Cycles Within Cycles, and that's May 16th through May 20th.
Yep.
And you can find that on Bella Retreats if you're interested.
Yep.
And, oh, go ahead.
Or in my site, Holes to Heavens, it's on the main page of the
And
site.
then Holes to Heaven. For some reason, my whole life I've been infatuated with the word holes.
Okay.
Because like you can spell it two different ways, and they both have completely opposite energies and meanings to them.
They do.
Yeah, where it's like one is like completeness, and one is and like fullness, and one is emptiness and nothingness. So yours is spelled HOLES. To Heavens, and Heavens is plural.com. And then what's the retreat you're doing in June?
It's through this organization called the CIA, not the government agency, but Cosmic Intelligence Agency. And it's going to be me and 5 other astrologers that are involved with the CIA at this venue called Valley Soul in Boulder, if you're familiar with it. And yeah, it's just going to be a weekend where Friday night, actually one of the women involved was a part of starting Rhythm Sanctuary. If you're familiar with that, like ecstatic dance community. So we're going to be doing an intentional astro dance type thing Friday night. And then Brett Joseph, he's like really good with astronomy. He goes by Gemini Brett. He's going to take us all outside afterwards and do some stargazing, if there's no clouds, that is. And then throughout the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, there's going to be lectures by all of us. And actually, believe it or not, Mars and Venus are mine. Talking about them again. Well, it's like if I'm putting so much energy into them, going into like a summer that's all about them in a huge way, like as far as visibility and what's going on in the sky, I might as well just keep talking about it. I don't need to diversify that much.
No, and it's great because you're going to have a different audience.
And I'll learn so much at the retreat. Like it'll refine certain ideas that I already have, because that's what happens once you hear stories and once you like go into all of it. And so, yeah, it'll be different.
It's like live research.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know I think you told me the dates. Will you give me the dates again for the June one?
The June one, I think it's June 6th. That weekend, or June 8th that weekend. I can double check, but something like that.
Looks good. Great. This has been so much fun. I feel actually like I learned a lot. Like I have a whole page of notes over here.
Nice.
I'm like, oh, I want to know about that. Oh, really? Tell me more. So that was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I mean, there's hundreds of podcasts that I've done. And so if you want to learn more about Saturn, well, I have a Saturn podcast. They're all free, but I also have classes that I've done on all the planets and stuff like this too, that go way deeper with chart examples, and it's live like this with a screen share. So yeah, I've created it to where it's like, okay, free content to get people interested in what we're doing here. And then there's these steps of going deeper, like the public classes, the Patreon that I do, which is huge for community and just more content. And then the apprenticeship is the main offering that I do every year.
We didn't even talk about your school. Like,
the apprenticeship happens every year.
And it's 8 months long, right?
8-9 months, yeah.
Yeah. And that starts in what month?
Usually at the beginning of the year. So this year we began on February 15th.
Mm.
So we're like 8 weeks in at the moment.
And if someone's interested, like when should they start paying attention to sign up for it?
We have a wait list. And so if they
Oh,
become interested, they email us and then they get put on the wait list.
okay, cool. It's something it's going way back, but I want to touch on it, especially for people that are looking for like an apprenticeship or they're really wanting to learn from you, is when you were speaking about how it becomes like vulnerable when you step onto this path, like all of a sudden like you kind of get oxied out of like different friendships, and like people are like, oh, you get in the weird category, and being a psychic, I was like instantly put into that category. And
Yeah.
in hindsight, I only probably lost like 4 or 5, maybe 10 people. Trying to date is a whole nother thing. People are really weirded out by it. But
Right.
you have like the thought of like being a witch, or it's like it comes with so many different things. But the full circle on it's like when I think about like past lives and like our generations of the world has gone back like millions of years, right? And it's like there was oracle readers, you have those who built the pyramids to the stars, it's like it's the ancient medicine. It's just how it's become translated that it has like a negative effect. And I feel like even though it can have some of that like resistance in the world today stepping into that path, I feel like it's it's blooming and it's blossoming, but two, I also feel like it holds such a deep importance, right? Like it helps people heal, it helps people understand things that they can't like wrap their head around. It's like these are our gifts that we should be stepping into and like be welcoming into.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can't allow people that are going to react and shut you out of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. Like, it's absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
Because if we really were friends, if you really had an open mind, even if we're not friends, you wouldn't have judgment.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really important. Like when you do encounter that energy, or putting your videos up and becoming public in that
Mm-hmm.
kind of way, you become a beacon. The brighter and brighter and brighter you get, to more and more little slimy demons that like come and project their shadow all over you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, cool, can't see your face, don't know your name, there's nothing about you. Would you say this to me in person?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But like, that's the environment we live in online.
Mm-hmm.
That people, of course, get triggered by those that step more onto their path. And there is more light coming off of them because it awakens something in them. And like, I don't like it. Like, I don't like this energy of confidence. I don't like this energy. Like, I'm going to call it arrogance, right? Or I'm not going to. It's such an interesting thing because a lot of people, friends of mine that are putting themselves out there, get really, really perturbed and shut down even sometimes through criticism.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, like, I'm not going to say it in the same way again that I have in the past. And then when I invite it in, then I get to experience it again. But
Right?
there's something about it that's essential, because once you start getting criticism, not necessarily hate and vitriol and stuff like this, but criticism, that's a really good sign because you can learn from it. Even though mostly it's not founded in any truth, there's still something that can be learned from it. And so you just use that as like a guidepost, like along the way. But I'll just say like one last thing that's so important for you and any of your watchers, listeners that are trying to put themselves out there in any capacity. The power of the rotten apple is phenomenal in the sense that you can say, we'll just say there's 1,000 people that watch this or listen to this, and 99% of them love you, love this conversation. Just, it was great for them. But then there's one person that comments on your necklace, that comments on me in some sort of a way, and it's just like disgusting energy.
Mm-hmm.
that rotten apple has the capacity, if you don't have discernment, to completely ruin your day or let it go longer. It just kind of it can infect you in this really potent way. And that we first need to be aware that it's inevitable. When you put yourself out there, it's going to happen. But then what do you do with the energy? And I think it's like understanding what that person's doing, first of all, right? How it is this projection of their shadow in some sense, but also how you can't allow that in. 99% of people love you. One person does not. Go into the grocery store. How many people are going to love you or hate you? It's going to be a way different percentage, right?
Well, to me, it's like I keep hearing like Mars. That's where you need the Mars, you
Totally.
know, like the severing. Like, okay, that doesn't serve, you know, like.
Yeah, that's healthy Mars. Unhealthy Mars would be fighting that person.
Oh.
Right? Unhealthy Mars is like, oh, it resurrects my shadow, and now we're doing battle in the comment section.
And that's where the inner work is.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah, it's definitely interesting, but I want to reconfirm that I don't think it's a reason to stop following your path. I don't think it's a reason, you know, because I know personally, like, I'm so sensitive and I've really had to work on thick skin, you know, and it still sometimes gets to me. Like I'm still sad about the 4 or 5 friends I lost like 5 years ago, you know, but I'm finally like getting thicker skin where it's like, okay, well, they probably really weren't my friend in the first place, you know, or are not meant to be my friend in the long term. Like, it is what it is, you know, but what's great is it puts you on the path of meeting more like-minded people, more people that are in alignment with you, more people that want to raise your light in the world, you know. So when it comes to like doing an apprenticeship or stepping into a path of like an astrologer or a healer of some sort, like, you know, it's like you just have to remember that, like, and it's with anything, like not everyone's going to love everything, you know, so it's just a matter of staying true to who you are and knowing that you have a purpose and a reason, and to just keep persevering with that space, you know. Yeah. Okay, so thank you all for joining in. Again, this is Adam Sommer. Thank you so much for being a guest today. And
thank you.
You're welcome. And if you want to find him, he's at holestoheavens.com. You can also listen to him on his podcast, Exploring Astrology. Check out any of his retreats, Cycles Within Cycles, Cosmic Intelligence. Oh, did I get
the CIA one?
No. Cosmic Intelligence Awareness. What's the A? I can't remember.
The agency. That's the one.
Agency. Yeah. Cosmic Intelligence Agency. And maybe you might be his next apprenticeship there.
Sure.
Great. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye.